Coming up in this inaugural episode of Elder Scrolls Weekly, we take a hands-on look at Elder Scrolls Online and ask, is it for MMO fans, Elder Scrolls fans, or both? We explore the world and story of Bethesda's upcoming MMO, and we preview the massively detailed content that's coming up over the following weeks. So please stay tuned for the only Elder Scrolls show you will ever need. Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to Elder Scrolls Weekly, which is our brand new show focusing on everything Elder Scrolls. I'm joined here today by Mr. Andy Kelly, the man behind Olaf.
Hello.
And just by means of an introduction, the show will be focusing primarily at the moment on Elder Scrolls Online, but as it progresses week in, week out, we'll be looking at new things, anything to do with the Elder Scrolls series in general, really. Gameplay, lore, maps, you name it, we're going to be sort of delving as deep as we can into it. I think both of us probably have spent a good deal of time in Tamriel.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to add up the amount of time I've played all the Elder Scrolls games across over the years since Morrowind, but it's a high number.
Yeah, we're looking at least in thousands there. I'm sure people have probably done tens of thousands and will happily comment on that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be like a labour of love, I think. And by all means, sort of the things that we're due to cover and things that we cover, we'd really like your interaction. So, get in the comments, tell us the sort of things you'd like us to delve into, the sort of things you'd like us to talk about. And hopefully, as the series progresses as well, we'll have the chance to sort of go hands-on with the game and answer any specific questions you might have. And with that in mind, Andy, you've already had a fair bit of time with the game, haven't you?
Yeah, I've spent a couple of hours with a recent build of Elder Scrolls Online that Bethesda showed at a showcase of their games, and it was my first time with it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I played as both a long-time player of MMOs and as a long-time Elder Scrolls fan. So I went in with a certain degree of trepidation because translating the Elder Scrolls experience, which to me is like a solo experience, it's like you immersed on your own, having this great journey. The idea of sharing that with 100 other, an infinite amount of other people, all living out their own lives, seemed like it might be a bit of a strange marriage, but it seems to work. At least from the small nugget that I've got to experience. Yeah,
I mean that's I think a key thing that we want to sort of get across from the start, like. This show, and we think hopefully the game itself, it's not just for MMO fans and perhaps not just for fans of the Elder Scrolls. Is this a game that you can see like the people that have been there since maybe Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind getting into?
Well, they're making steps to try and to bridge that gap, but it is fundamentally like an MMO. It's like super MMO-y in many ways, but there's enough familiar elements from Elder Scrolls history in terms of gameplay and setting to sort of tether to. So even if you don't particularly care for MMOs, this might be the gateway drug for Elder Scrolls fans into the world of MMOs, because it can be a daunting world to get your head around. I remember when I first started playing World of Warcraft many years ago, feeling bewildered and overwhelmed by it, but now I'm quite comfortable getting into a new MMO, and I think this will be a good bridge from the world of the lone adventurer to sharing that experience with loads of other people,
and having that kind of common ground of a world that you're familiar with little bits of it. And this is something that I really hope we go into in later episodes. We'll be looking at the map, and we'll be looking at the worlds that we've seen before in Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, and also like going further back and picking out landmarks and things like that, and just that fact that I think anyone that's played any Elder Scrolls game is immediately going to be sort of recognising sort of the lore and the characters and things like that.
And also on a more mechanical level, a lot of what makes up Elder Scrolls' gameplay is here.
Yeah.
And I'll go into specifics of that.
That's what I was going to ask you next, actually. Like, I think combat seems like a really sensible place to start. And one of the things that I sort of read a quote about it, I think it was on Tamriel Foundry, was them sort of wanting you to play the game, unlike most MMOs where you're sort of looking at the taskbar or you're sort of playing the UI itself, does it still have that kind of crash and bang feel of Skyrim?
That is one thing that separates it from other MMOs, where anyone who's played an MMO for a great deal of time will know that you spend your time hitting number keys for your quick bar, and you remember an order. Yeah. Like when you encounter an enemy, out of muscle memory, you put on your buffs and you you've got like, you memorize what you do, and then you alternate between. Yeah. If you're playing Guild Wars where the attacks have multiple stages, you're like hitting attacks three times. Well, the difference here is that there's no cooldowns, right, which is pretty big for an MMO. The combat is controlled with the mouse, so you attack with the left mouse button and you block with the right mouse button. That's if you have a shield equipped. Like it's each hand, like each trigger on console, Elder Scrolls, or on PC, the two mouse buttons. It's your hands. So whatever you've got equipped. So you have the traditional green, blue, and red. Meters, which is your health, magicka, stamina. Yeah. And so attacks you use or abilities you use in the quick slot bar are dictated by them. Right. So rolling and sort of blocking your stamina. Yeah. Okay. So if like a certain ability might be an evasive ability, will use stamina points. Okay. A spell will use magicka points, obviously, and a certain fighter style berserker attacks and stuff will use a stamina as well, and like certain things will use health. So instead of having like you use an ability 30 seconds cooldown, use an ability 60 seconds cooldown, it takes from your pool of health, magicka, and stamina. Okay. So exactly as it does in Elder Scrolls. When you swing your sword, you use stamina. So it's slightly different, but it is good that they've kept that system there, so that anyone who's played Elder Scrolls will be instantly familiar with, if I use magic, my magic is going to go down. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I suppose there's potential there for, if you're playing an Orc Berserker, if you want to go in and just, don't play the long game and just go swinging a two-handed weapon repeatedly at someone, you're going to use all your stamina up, but you might kill them quickly. And all the weapons you're familiar with. Yeah, and all the weapons are the Elder Scrolls standards, the two-handed swords, and also the stats are the same, where you're good with single-handed weapons, good with double-handed weapons. So there's no sort of division between axe, sword? No, it's categories, and you can wield, no matter what class you are, there's no classes as such, you can wield any weapon or wear any armour. Okay. But obviously one character will be more specialised in it than others, but there's no limit to what you can pick up, which is really good, because you can create these it gives you a lot of creative freedom to mix and match kits and abilities and classes to create a legitimately bespoke character. Yeah, I mean that sort of feels like a very Elder Scrolls way of sort of playing on that kind of triumvirate of sort of the MMO standards of sort of tank, healer, damage dealer, and Elder Scrolls for me, like, very rarely have I ever sort of just taken a character off the intro sheet. You kind of, you make your own and you sort of pick the things you like, and indeed they've kind of done away with that entirely with Skyrim, so that kind of feels like the most natural way of doing that, because I understand, like, you can sort of, you're encouraged to mix and match your armour, because there's sort of passive abilities or buffs attached to each type. And what makes it interesting from an MMO perspective is that in say the Old Republic, you see you're fighting a Sith juggernaut, for example, and you know exactly what to expect from them, because you can tell by looking at what class he is most of the time. Yeah, you can, by the gear they've got, and so you know what attacks they're going to be using out of the pool, out of their pool of 20, 30 attacks and abilities. You know what's coming up. Whereas I like the idea of, from a PvP perspective, seeing a character in Elder Scrolls Online and not being able to tell what they've got under their up their wizard sleeve. Yeah, I mean, So you look at them, you don't see the armor and the weapon. You go, well, he's going to be using this attack, so I'll use this buff or whatever. So there's an element of unpredictability there, which I think is good. That is exciting. Yeah, I mean that is what they've promised. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure once you've been playing the game for 400 hours, you start to instinctively know that Khajiit's going to start using magic or whatever. Yeah, I'm sure it'll fall into definite slots, but the potential is there, especially with, like, I read about the sorcerer, you have the ability to conjure items. So essentially you could have, like, what is on paper a caster being able to summon like a load of bound Daedric armor and just tanking instead. Well, it means you can have like usually, like, if you're a caster in an MMO, you are stuck with weaker weapons and lighter armor, but you can, in this, you could have like a Daedric armor wearing caster who you are like a sort of like an you can mix, like you could have like an archer caster, or like make all these weird like mixes, which is really the spirit of any good RPG has been able to create your own weird character, and especially in Elder Scrolls. In Skyrim, you can, by following paths on the star sign menu, you can like make interesting dual classes, and that goes way back to like old Dungeons and Dragons, like making like a spell sword and stuff like that, but on a much bigger scale. So I think that'll be interesting to see a player that you want to fight and wondering, you go, oh, it's just like a guy in light armor. I'm wearing Daedric armor, then suddenly busts out these like a giant flaming double-handed sword or whatever. So that's quite cool.
That is cool. I'm excited to see how that works. I mean, do you know sort of? I've got like a brief list of what the sort of different weapon sets. So you can have one-handed shield, you can have dual wielding, you can have two-handed. Yeah. And bows, obviously. But the thing that sort of seems vastly different to me, and I'm quite interested to see if you had any sort of interaction with it at all, is the way that the magic and staffs work. Because is everything staff-based now or not?
I didn't play a caster character, but I do know that one difference between the main series and Elder Scrolls Online is that to use spells, you don't have to equip the spell in your hand.
Right. Okay.
So you've got like 3 different types of element spells in your quick bar. You can quickly go between ice and fire. The reason for that, they say, is because when you're playing Elder Scrolls and you're fighting and you come across like a frost Atronach, and you say, right, I'm going to get some fire spells
you press
out.
Pause, don't
and
you?
You pause it, and it gives you time to quickly equip you. But if you're playing a real-time MMO and you're trying to fiddle with your what's equipped in the middle of a big fight, so they've put it into you can have multiple elemental magic in the quick slot bar, which is is one of many ways in which it's streamlined to make up for the fact that you can't pause.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a reassuring fact for me, is that it seems to be at every single stage they're trying to find ways to get that sort of the MMO mechanics that you can't really change, because that's what they are, into something familiar for the people that like the series. So.
Because you couldn't have... There's got to be some element of... when you're fighting someone in an MMO, it's sending... Data is being sent back and forth over a server. So you couldn't have that kind of really straight real-time combat from the main series. There's got to be some element of being more mechanical slightly. But it does, because you're attacking and blocking with the mouse buttons, and it does feel... There's the illusion that it's real-time. But there's obviously a bit of background machinery whirring away, making it so that there's no lag and so on. So it doesn't feel quite as that kind of sloppy metal on metal feel you get when you're fighting someone in the Elder Scrolls. It feels really almost kind of like unpredictable and messy and sloppy, where you're like just bashing these 2 big chunks of metal together. This doesn't have quite that same tactile feeling. Okay. But it still is real time.
At least, and your shield isn't just like an armor stat now. You're going to use it.
It doesn't. Well, when you're attacking in, say, World of Warcraft, you're hitting 1 on your number, on your number thing, and your character is swinging his sword, but it's just an animation playing. This feels more like you're actually hitting something, but it is still. It's like halfway between true real time and MMO pre-canned animations, from what I could tell. Okay,
so that kind of deals with the more mechanical side of things. Is sort of what specifically about the game makes it feel like made it feel like an Elder Scrolls game to you?
Well, they made a big show of saying that yes, the game will have a first-person view in it, despite initially and foolishly saying it won't have a first-person view. They've probably from the vibe I got from the developers I spoke to, is that they really had quite a hard time jamming that first-person view in now, but they've done it, and when I played it, it was in first person. Okay. So you've got the 2 hands sticking out, and you can fight in first person. But what made it, when it felt really Scrollsy to me, is when I was just wandering around a town, picking up stuff off tables, fruit and silverware, and reading books, and going up to a door and it saying press E to open, and it felt, it had the visual language of an Elder Scrolls game, and it had the same, the character movement felt the same. The only difference being there's no dynamic physics, so there's no like first row dying all the food off the Jarl's table or any
collecting
of that,
heads on
stacking stuff or throwing cheese wheels around or putting pots on people's heads, because
you've already had that.
Imagine an MMO trying to keep track of all those physics objects. Like, trying to keep track of those objects broke the PS3 version. If you move too many apples or pots or whatever. So
it's just a world full of containers. Like, everyone you kill was like a box full of stuff, really. So
they've taken that away now, because that would be madness.
But you've still got that sense of going around and just picking stuff up as you see it. And I presume like everyone's seeing their own version.
Well, it'll fade back to. But I'm not sure whether it respawns or the other players see it as not taken.
Okay.
Because otherwise, busy towns, every shelf would be empty.
Yeah, it'd be madness.
And all the stuff you pick up can be used for crafting. But we'll go into that another time, because that's pretty in depth. There's a lot of non-combat stuff to take part in.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I think we want to stress is, like, we're sort of doing a bit of an overview in this episode, but potentially there's like because of the depth of this game and the games that preceded it, there's probably an episode on crafting, there's an episode on gods, there's an episode on Daedra. So
what's good is that there's going to be ways to play this without doing quests, which, if anyone has seen CVG's Rags to Riches series, will know that part of the fun of Elder Scrolls is having the world there and not having to fight anything, and just enjoying the world for what it is, and doing jobs and doing non-combative quests. So there's going to be a lot of that in it. So we might do an episode or a section and a future episode about how you can play the Elder Scrolls online, like Olaf. Yeah,
be Olaf in the Elder Scrolls. And if you haven't seen Olaf, the annotation will be on screen now, so you should definitely go and check it out. Yeah. Little plug there. If we could just briefly go back to the first person thing, if you're not done with it, like, on the most simple level, can you see it working, especially when you get to that the sort of the PvP endgame, when everyone's running to Cyrodiil and you're fighting? Sort of.
I think if you're playing PvP, you're going to want to see other characters around you. I think practically for PvP stuff, you're going to want to use the third person view, so you can see whether a healer's near, or someone key to your party is near. But for exploring, I think it's essential for exploring the world, because you want part of the Elder Scrolls appeal is you're in the head of the character, you are the character, you're seeing it through your eyes. Whereas if you're in third person, it feels a little bit more distant and disjointed. So I think I'm really glad they put it in, and it works fine. It just works as you might expect. It's probably been a real technical headache for them to get working, but it just feels like Elder Scrolls. And I found myself, like, because part of anyone who's played an MMO will know that character customization is important. You want to see your character, and there's so much armor in this, of all the different types. You've got the dwarven armor, the golden centurion type helmets. You've got the Nord horns on the helmets and stuff. So a lot of the time, whenever I got new equipment, I'd flip between the views, just to see my character.
Go and stand like a sunset and watch the light glimmering off you.
And admire his gear and stuff. So, but for just wandering around, generally, it felt natural. It felt like it had always been in there. And it should always have been there, because not having a first person in an Elder Scrolls game, I think, is just not right. Just wrong.
I mean, the money shot for me, I think, is going to be the moment when you can walk from Black Marsh directly into Cyrodiil, or you go over a mountain in Skyrim and you're sort of coming down on.
Hopefully it is seamless, because one of the fun things in World of Warcraft for me was when I got to a high enough level, I could go pretty much anywhere within reason. I just enjoyed traveling from my starting area all the way up to somewhere on like I play as Horde, because Horde are the best, obviously.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to travel from like the Horde's continent over to the Alliance's continent in real time, and see the scenery changing and it all streaming in, which so I'd love as an Elder Scrolls fan to be able to walk in real time across the border from Cyrodiil into Skyrim, because in Oblivion I spent many a time like longing to cross the mountains,
trying to scrub over the mountains.
But now hopefully you can do that, and it's not confirmed yet whether it's seamless, but I think the technology's there. And I noticed that when I played the game, there's tons of fogging. It seems to be it could have just been the weather, but it did seem like they were making up for the scale of it by stuff in the distance was very blurry and fogged out. So it didn't have those endless draw distance of the console game, but with MMOs there's always a graphical step down. So I hope that is a sign that you'll be able just to go for a wander. Because I'd love to go from like one corner of Tamriel, like from High Rock all the way down to Black Marsh or something. That'd be really good.
It's like a world that we're all sort of so familiar with, and I think in some aspects it's kind of more well realised than something like World of Warcraft, where they're really pushing hard to make every single area like geographically diverse, probably completely nonsensically as well. So you go from jungle to mountains. But
well, there's some interesting. I mean, like in WoW, I kind of liked Azeroth, but it was a lot of like fantasy staples where you had like the sort of barren
forest,
the barren desert leading up into the magic pixie forest over to the
3 different types of Mordor.
Yeah. And whereas I think Tamriel, there's some really interesting architecture. Yeah, you've got like the deserts of Hammerfell. You've got the swamps of Black Marsh, and you've got the idyllic forests of Cyrodiil. You've got the snowy
volcanic rocks,
wastes of and then High Rock, which we'll talk about in a bit. Actually, is where I visited in my hands-on.
Yeah, I'd like to get some info about that.
So I think it's a good variety of locations, and these locations, because if you've been playing Elder Scrolls for years, reading about these places in the books, or having only ever seen them in late 90s PC VGA visuals, now seeing them in high def is exciting. Getting to see the places you've read about in books that you've picked up in Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting thing, isn't it? It just has such a well-established sort of geography and lore that anyone that's played these games is going to know a little bit about all of these places, and actually seeing them for real is going to be pretty special.
It will also be exciting to see these places at different time periods.
Yeah.
So you'll be seeing Morrowind 800 years before the events of Morrowind. You'll be seeing Skyrim 1,000 years before the events of Skyrim. So it'll be familiar yet different.
Yeah.
Because they could have easily just copied Skyrim. A lot of the cities will be there, like Windhelm will still be there because that's been there since like the dawn of. Since the moment the Nords first arrived in Skyrim. So there'll be a lot of familiar cities.
I understand,
but there'll be new stuff as well.
Windhelm's not going to be there from launch. It's one of the cities that's going to be sort of trickled in afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
But potentially it's going to be everywhere, isn't it? So.
Yeah. That there's going to be content leaked in, like the. I know for a fact that the Dark Brotherhood and the Thieves Guild, which are some of the best sub-quest sets in the series, are going to be added later. They won't be there at launch, so. That's kind of a little bit worrying to me, that I wouldn't like to be travelling across Skyrim and hit an invisible wall and going.
No. I did wonder how they're going to do that.
They'll do it
Windhelm is closed.
Yeah, there'll be some like endgame. There'll be like a big magical barrier. Molag Bal is blocking us from entering. Until this new update comes out.
Pay now and you can. So, you said you were in High Rock when you played it. Could you sort of like? Did it feel like sort of geographically distinct from what you've played before, and did it feel like a sort of well-realised world?
Well, it was kind of, and this is not what I expected from High Rock, because it's the home of the Bretons, and they seem like a sort of hardy, like they come from forests or whatever, but it was almost tropical.
Right. All right.
And the area, that was the areas just outside Daggerfall. Daggerfall is the city that my hands-on was, they dumped us in the middle of Daggerfall. And which was the setting of Elder Scrolls 2 in 1996. Yeah, so when we last saw Daggerfall, it was like the Duke Nukem, like the Doom Duke Nukem engine style, like pedestrians were like sprites that when you moved, they were always facing you, and the textures were really low res. Because Elder Scrolls 2 was. Had like something like 15,000 towns in it, but it was all randomly generated.
Yeah, so it was enormous, wasn't it?
Like all the towns looked the same with a slightly different colour palette.
Yeah.
So seeing Daggerfall, was cool, and it. This is, I think, the first time we've seen High Rock in anything approaching like a decent resolution.
Right.
And it looked very much like an Elder Scrolls town. It had the sort of market square. It had the
swinging signs. And
and it had even the signs outside all the shops with like the similar iconography, like the magic shop had the eye, and the mortar and pestle. There was the castle, really massive castle, which according to lore is like an important area in the region of Daggerfall. Castle Daggerfall it's called. And it was, it wasn't. It was still very much like classic fantasy style visuals. It wasn't like totally wild and unreal. It wasn't like somewhere in Morrowind where you've got like bizarre architecture. It was more
giant
like
mushrooms.
It was more like a ye olde medieval fantasy town, but on a really big scale.
You kind of want that from the Bretons. So they sort of, to me, feel a bit more like, especially now that the sort of Imperials are kind of, they're sort of sidelined a bit in this one. They're the kind of, if you want to be your mounted knight type of character, then they're the people to go with. I guess it's going to get, like when you do go to sort of Black Marsh and elsewhere and places like that, that's when they're going to have the chance to go a little bit mad with the designs.
So there's going to be a lot of different fantasy tones to each area. That's going to be different, which a fantasy MMO has to have castles and stuff. But there was a really big waterfront with big ships and stuff. So I think it's like a port town.
Yeah. What about scaled? I mean, because that's quite a sort of an important town. Did it feel suitably sort of huge? Yeah,
it is massive, and there's big wide streets, obviously, to accommodate a lot of players. There was a lot of running around, and it felt, because I was only in there with 10 or 15 journalists, it felt really quite empty.
Yeah, that's quite depressing, isn't it?
And there was a lot of, again, it might have just been the weather. I suspect it was because I've seen footage where the draw distance is longer. It was really foggy, but it's a seaside town, so I had that kind of foggy, port town vibe.
I'm absolutely fine with that, since my favourite game was Morrowind, which was just just fog.
It's not as bad as Morrowind, and it's not like N64 2-rock style levels of fog, but it's still it was hard to get a feeling for the full scale of the town. But then I did, at the end, after I'd done a few quests, which I'll talk about shortly, I left. I went, right, I've got 10 minutes left. I'm just going to run out of Daggerfall.
Right.
I'm just going to go for a wander. And when I reached the sort of countryside outside, it suddenly got really sunny.
Right.
And it felt kind of tropical. It was like shimmering water and white sand, golden sand. And there was tons of enemies flying around that were way more high level than me. So I had to like sort of weave between
Going back inside.
Yeah, and by the end of it, I had like a whole, that classic MMO thing of having aggroed like 20 enemies, and they're all behind me. I was just leading them in like a conga line. I've got to see as much as I can.
Yeah.
And it was really, it looked really nice. I'm not sure whether what might have happened is, I'm not sure of the scale of the map, is I might have wandered into another region.
Right.
Or because it felt kind of at odds with the sort of gloomy, foggy city. So I don't know what happened. Might have just been that the weather changed. But yeah, it felt you'd never seen Elder Scrolls in a kind of tropical environment before, which was felt interesting. But the city was very much like, which is why I think they put us in there for the demo. It was like, this is Elder Scrolls. It's got inns, it's got taverns, and the quests were super Elder Scrolls. Well, one of them was tracking down a murderer. Every Elder Scrolls has, there's a murder, you've got to find evidence and track down who it was. I won't spoil the quest, but it turns out that there was a nice little twist where it ended with a kind of mini boss battle against something, and it felt like Elder Scrolls. And when you talk to someone, the NPCs are all voiced. So obviously a lot of money's been spent on it, because the Old Republic was fully voiced, and it cost an absolute fortune.
Right.
And the download was like 40 gig or something.
Right.
So it's like every character is voiced. The animation's not great. It doesn't, like Elder Scrolls characters always look weird.
Yeah.
Like weird mannequins.
Yeah, I'd be slightly disappointed if it was really good, actually. I'd be a bit confused and scared by it.
They're always slightly at odds with the world, and so the character models aren't great, but the voice acting's fine. It's just like as good as Elder Scrolls would get. It's not, because they're voicing thousands of NPCs. Everyone's not going to be like a tour de force of acting.
Well, actually, I've read that everyone doing a voice is a member of the Screen Actors Guild, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
if they are a bit daft, then
I think you can get in there if you've done like one thing, though.
Right.
It doesn't have to be good. I don't know. Maybe I'm underselling the power of SAG, but I don't know. But it was totally fine. As far as MMO quest givers go, it's better than WoW's walls of text.
Yeah. And do you feel they're going to move away from the kind of collect 10 hides for me kind of quest?
Well, none of the quests I did were like that. They were all heavily story-based.
Right.
There was still, if you broke them down to mechanics, it was just go here, fight this guy, go here, fight this guy, whatever. but the story elements were well done, and I was driven by the story and not by the desire to just get the quest done, which is really weird. But it's always kind of like that at the early stages of an MMO, where you're super. You're like, I'm gonna get into the story here, but by like 400 hours, you're just like
just want the best sword.
Ding. Yeah, you just like skip. Do the quest. But and the stories did seem quite, and they were like multi-part as well, where they take me all around the town. And as I was taken around the town from the waterfront to the castle, I was learning about it, and I ended up doing like quests for the king of Daggerfall, and so there was that sense of getting involved in different people's lives as well. So I was tracking down the murderer in the slums. I was working for the king. So I got the cities have that sense of a hierarchy of working for the nobles, working for the common folk.
That's cool.
The castle looming over the slums and stuff. So the world building and the sense that there's a history here and there's a culture is really strong. And I hope that echoes over it, because I'd love to see. It's going to be totally different from being in the desert in Hammerfell, or being in Black Moss dealing with the Argonians, because they've got totally different cultures. So that's another, from a Elder Scrollsy lore storyline perspective, that's going to be good to get involved in the lives of all these different cultures as well.
That's going to be the real test, I think, is how they sort of, perhaps it's a little bit easier to have a king telling you what to do and working for nobles and seeing the slums and stuff, but kind of making like a kind of a swampland of guerrilla warfare lizards. Like, how are you going to do quests for them? But I think the Elder Scrolls games, perhaps, I think it's something that people don't give them enough credit for, is that they are really good, like, quest builders, and they're really good at making them funny and entertaining. And occasionally you'll do sort of 3 or 4 kill this guy quests, and then suddenly you'll find yourself doing something completely off the wall, and you kind of don't even know how you got there.
Well, there was one where I was just exploring, and I found like a little cove, a little pirate's cove type thing. I went into a cave and found out it was like a beautiful forest inside the cave. It was like really beautiful scenery, and there was these like worshippers worshipping this like god of the feast,
right? And
they were all getting drunk and drinking wine and eating meat and stuff, and I joined in with their festivities, and that was like I collected some stuff in a traditional MMO style, and then I dumped it on this altar, and then it turns out that the god they were worshipping is actually a mischievous Daedric prince,
right?
And so he's like tricking them into just for as Daedric princes do, just messing with the mortals, and so you get drawn into this whole, from what I thought was a basic, just a little bit of storytelling or whatever, it turned into this multi-part dungeon-led dealing with like a mischievous Daedric prince thing, and getting like, I got banished to a plane of oblivion, and this is all just, I just stumbled upon this.
Well, I was going to ask
the
exactly
developers
that.
weren't saying go here and do this brilliant quest, because no one else found it. I was I saw a cave miles away, and I went, I'm going to swim over there, and I was rewarded for it. And they said that all their quests are designed for exploration, so that you'll be on one and you'll go, oh, there's something interesting over there, I'll break off and do that. And that's exactly what happened to me. And just by going, my curiosity of going, I wonder what's in that cave, was rewarded with a brilliant quest.
Fantastic. So you still get the sense like in Skyrim, and like you're going to stumble across quests, and sort of like, instead of just like going to the man with the exclamation mark above his head.
Because there was no marking of any kind here, so the only clue that there was something going on in that cave was an NPC stood outside it. So I thought there was obviously something in there. And it wasn't that I was just blindly following exclamation points on the mini-map. They are there in towns, but there's also this is really crucial, I think, to any Elder Scrolls game. Like you say, you just wander around, you go, oh, I found something, I'm going to see what that is, and you're rewarded with it. I think Skyrim, as much as I love that game, and I've played it for probably approaching 1,000 hours, you did get into that bit of a routine where you talk to an NPC and they'd go and find this, and it'd be like, I'm in an ancient Nordic ruin again, or it's a Dwemer ruin, or you just felt like you'd go for a ruin, you'd get some rubbish loot at the end, you'd turn the quest in. The quests I played in Elder Scrolls Online seemed more interesting and more diverse in terms of writing and what you were doing. So that was only a little handful of quests in a central town. If that is the path of the course, if that's every quest is interesting like that, and that'd be really good, from a gameplay perspective, and keeping you interested, because MMO quests can get really tedious.
They can. I think you're absolutely right in what you said about just losing the thread of why you're doing things. And if
you don't question why. You never. by the end you're like, I don't care why I'm doing this.
Yeah, why am I killing these dinosaurs?
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
I'm just doing it to check off the list and get the XP.
Yeah.
But this, I felt like I was driven by the story, not by the urge to get a sword and whatever XP.
Yeah, well, that's crucial, isn't it? And I think quite a nice link to, I think what we'll probably finish on. It's just sort of a bit of a chat about the story and kind of where what we already know about Elder Scrolls fits into the world, and it's an interesting period, isn't it, in time, like you sort of mentioned earlier. It's quite far before what we've already seen.
A millennium before the events of Skyrim. So a lot can happen in a millennium, especially in a world where there's demons and oblivion hell gates everywhere. So we'll probably go into more detail in it in a future episode, but the basic crux of it is that Molag Bal's trying to pull the entire world, or perhaps even the entire sort of plane of existence, into oblivion. Because at the moment you've got Nirn, which is the planet. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. Yeah, well, Nirn's the plane of existence, right. Not just the planet, but
I thought Mundus was the plane, and Nirn was
right. No, you're right. All right, we got it wrong. Yeah, the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah, so Nirn is the world that you're on.
Yeah.
And Mundus is the plane of existence where humans dwell.
Right. So, and he's trying to yank the whole lot into Cold Harbor. With dark anchors.
So, if you don't know, Molag Bal is the Daedric prince of enslaving mortals, and he's some Daedric princes like or tolerate humans. Molag Bal likes to toy with them. He and every Daedric prince has their own plane of oblivion. His is called Cold Harbor, and it's like a copy of Nirn, but like it's like its evil brother.
Yeah.
So it's always the air is freezing, the ground is slush, and there's a recreation of the Golden Tower.
I love this.
This is the capital of which says is the capital of Tamriel, which is in the middle of Cyrodiil, and except in Cold Harbor, it's covered in shit. Yeah, so Molag Bal has recreated the Tamriel, the sign of human rule in Tamriel, and covered it in feces,
blood and excrement.
And so you will go to Cold Harbor in Elder Scrolls Online, but he's using these things called dark anchors,
right?
Yeah, when you're playing Elder Scrolls Online, you'll see them coming out of the sky and slamming into the ground. And
so I got an image of them literally sort of being like slapping into the ground and literally sort of rending the plane of existence.
They have shown some video of it. Yeah, they're like big sort of made of obsidian. Swirling with purple glowing energy.
Yeah, it has to be purple.
Yeah, because purple's evil, isn't it?
It is. Yeah,
and he's trying to basically drag Cold Harbor. He's trying to drag Nirn into Cold Harbor, so that the one and the same. And so you and all the other players are trying to stop him by taking over the White Gold, by invading Cyrodiil, where there is in this timeline there's no emperor, there's no imperial rule, so that place is up for grabs, and so you and one of you, whatever of the three factions you've chosen, are trying to get to the White Gold Tower to wrestle back control, to rule Tamriel, and to wrestle back control of the world from Molag Bal. Okay,
well, this is again something we're probably going into more detail in the future. Like the whole period is sort of after the Second Empire, isn't it? And the sort of Akavari potentates, is it?
Yeah.
Basically, snake men that were running the empire have all been assassinated by the Dark Brotherhood or the Morag Tong. And you're in the sort of, I read it as sort of a dark ages of the world.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it's like, because the dragon fires that burn in the White Gold Tower, that you have to, which the whole story of Oblivion is you trying to stop them from going out by getting Martin Septim to, he's got the blood to light them. They're out in this. There's no dragon fires.
And they've even lost the Amulet of Kings.
Yeah, right. So it's just crazy times for the Daedric lords that are just coming in and apparently there's been some mysterious explosion in the tower that's the shockwave has spread across Tamriel, and it's sending mages mad.
You're right.
And and more Daedra are spilling into the planet. So it's a bad time for everyone, and you are and this the races have been forced to band together to form 3 covenants, and you choose one.
I mean, they're sort of pretty tenuous alliances as well. Like the Ebonheart Pact is sort of between 3 races that traditionally have been knocking the bells and enslaving each other for
it's that you get that in a lot of sci-fi and stuff, where it's when there's a threat to the world, old allegiances and old enemies forget the past and band together to. It's the same with Mass Effect 3 is the exact same story, where Shepard has to get the Krogans and the Solarians to be friends to beat the. And he's always saying, "Forget about your pasts." And
you did it in Morrowind. You had the sort of that you had to sort of ally all the great houses and the sort of various guilds and things, and it does work. It always as sort of predictable as it is a thing that makes me go, that's cool.
It'll be some fun dialogue seeing these races who hate each other being forced to work together, and there'll be drama and internal conflict, and I think that's what will form the bit. There'll be a grand story to aim to, which is getting to Cyrodiil, and because once you've reached level
50,
once you've reached level 50, also you can do it earlier as well, but the main end game stuff is PvP in Cyrodiil, so Cyrodiil's like a great
they
big
scale you before, I think, don't they?
So it's like a big PvP arena basically, and
it's going to be great. And I think every town is going to be a fort, so you're going to get the forts that are kind of near to the border of a particular area that are always going to be in control of
whatever
the particular of Myriad Dominion.
But they'll probably do the same as Guild Wars, where there'll be contested areas, and it'll flag up and say this zone has been contested, and you have to run over and defend it or attack it, and so I think there'll be like a big this Cyrodiil in the center of the map will be ever changing the politics of it, which is perfect for PvP.
Absolutely, they've done it tremendously well. And if you'd have put this on the table before I knew anything about it, I would never have thought Cyrodiil would be the one area that isn't locked down. It's the most sort of key part of the lore in some ways, but they've picked a really good spot in that there is no emperor. The empire sort of
just a battlefield basically.
And on the timeline as well, if you look at the sort of second era, there's almost nothing for like 200, 300 years after this, so they can just do whatever the hell they want.
Well, quite cleverly, like some of the forts you'll be attacking and defending in Cyrodiil and Elder Scrolls Online are placed where there are ruins in Oblivion.
Oh, that is good. That's really cool.
So it all ties in with if you saw a ruin in Oblivion in Elder Scrolls Online, that would be a fort. Or
it'll be you that ruins it.
Yeah. So that they're really tying it into the Elder Scrolls games, which I think is essential to this feeling like part of that universe.
That's awesome. I mean, I think we probably rattled on for long enough now. Some of these things we'll definitely come back to in later episodes, and by all means, if you're watching, if there's anything you want us to dig into specifically, let us know. I think in future episodes we'll probably, next week if we can, we're probably going to look at the maps, because we've got like a breakdown of most of the world. There's sort of landmarks and all of them. Some of the oldest buildings in the lore should be in the game in certain places, so we'll probably have a look at that.
So if you want to know anything about the game itself, because we've played quite a lot of it, there's still loads I didn't go into, so I can tell you about the game. I can tell you about we can talk about lore stuff, about history of this, about how the history ties into other games, about specific characters or whatever. There's so much to talk about, and also this isn't just about Elder Scrolls Online. We're waiting primed for the first announcement of anything to do with Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah, we'll be all over that.
Yeah, so anything and everything Elder Scrolls is the core of this program.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for sticking with us as long as you have. Quick shout out to the Imperial Library, the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, and Tamriel Foundry, all of which we've used to sort of compile some of the stuff we've looked at today. Please subscribe if you want to know more, and we'll sort of keep you updated whenever we get any new information, new gameplay, and we'll be able to answer your questions. Also, check out Andy's Olaf series if you haven't already, because it's really good, and I'm not saying that just because I have no involvement with it. So
if you like Elder Scrolls and you haven't seen Rags to Riches, you click on the link in the description. Yeah, it's really worth checking out. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we will see you next week. Cheers.